So I just finished watching the 5-episode miniseries Chernobyl about the Chernobyl disaster. And actually the last episode hasn't even aired yet at the time I'm recording this. But it is already rated as the number 1 best TV show of all time on IMDb. And normally I don't care much for IMDb ratings, and I usually disagree with them, especially when it comes to TV shows and movies about the Soviet Union. But in this case, I actually kind of have to agree with the good rating, because it really is a really good show, and it really captures the essence of what happened back then, and it really captures the atmosphere. Of course, I myself didn't experience it other than as a kid in Germany, but I do actually remember not being allowed to go outside. And then eventually I was allowed to go outside, but I wasn't allowed to play in the sand, because the sand and the dust would store the radiation. And of course I had no idea what radiation was, so I asked what radiation is, and I was being told that it is something very bad, but that is invisible. And that's of course very difficult to grasp. It wasn't only difficult for me to grasp, I think it was difficult for everyone back then to grasp. And that's kind of the crux of the matter. I mean, nowadays we kind of, even children kind of understand, what radiation is, but it was only precisely because of the Chernobyl disaster that people started to understand what it is and kind of understand how it works. I mean, they don't really understand it, but at least now they do believe that there can be something harmful even though you can't actually see it. That's something that people understand now. But people back then didn't understand that yet, and they only started to understand it precisely because of the disaster. So this always kind of fascinated me, even as a child. But of course, as a child, I couldn't really get any information about it. So later on, it always fascinated me, and I watched all those documentaries about Chernobyl, about the disaster, and there were some really, really great documentaries, first-hand documentaries with footage from back then, and interviews from all the important characters in the movies, but not as characters, but the real actual people. And that's why the TV show now is such a great TV show, and why it can be so accurate is because they have all that footage from that back then, and all those documentaries and all those interviews with the real people to base it on. So it's really fairly accurate. It's not perfectly accurate, but it is as accurate as a TV show or a movie can be. Because, of course, you do have to take some artistic liberties, not because you want to, but because of the nature of a movie or a TV show. For example, in reality, you have hundreds of people, or even more, who were important in this and who contributed to this and to this horrible event. So actually there were many hundreds of people involved, but in a TV show or a movie you can't have hundreds of characters. You don't have time to introduce hundreds of characters. So one liberty that they had to take, for example, was that they had to condense certain characters. They have all the main characters, and they got them, they got them down right, and they look like the real characters. They made them look like the real characters, like the real people, and it's fairly accurate. But when it comes to some secondary characters, they they kind of had to condense them, so there could be one character in the movie, one character in the TV show, but in reality he was based on more than one character, so it was condensed because they simply didn't have time to introduce hundreds of different characters, so you have some condensed characters. So that's an example of one of those artistic liberties that they had to take, that anyone has to take if he wants to condense it into a movie or a 5-episode mini TV show. So you simply have to condense some things. But other than that, it's fairly accurate. Other than the liberties that they had to take, they really made an effort to be as accurate as they could. So it actually is a great TV series to learn about what happened, about the historical events surrounding Chernobyl. But it's also a great show if you just want to learn about the Soviet Union in general, because even though it's not actually about the Soviet Union as a whole, but only focuses on Chernobyl, the events of Chernobyl have actually always been a reflection of basically everything that went wrong in the Soviet Union. It's if you know about the disaster, or if you have watched the miniseries, then you realize, you mainly realize that first, this was an absolutely horrific catastrophe, that caused so many lives and impacted and harmed so many countless people in the most horrific way possible. So you kind of, and the TV show does a good job at really conveying the horror of it. It's because that's really difficult to convey, but the TV show does it as good as it is possible, for a TV show, for a miniseries. So you at least get a glimpse of the horror involved in this horrible catastrophe, and the harm, the immense harm it did to so many people. So that's the one thing it manages to convey. And the other thing it manages to convey is that this really didn't need to happen, on the one hand. On the other hand, it was actually inevitable. And it really wasn't the fault of just one guy or a few guys, nor was it even some unfortunate chain of events, just some very unfortunate coincidence. It wasn't. It really was inevitable, and it was a result of absolutely everyone involved in this, the bureaucrats, the people in the control room, the people involved in building the various aspects of the power plant. Everyone messed up, but actually they didn't. They didn't. It's not that it's kind of the fault of everyone, but then again, they really didn't do that intentionally. There was just no other way to get things done back then. It was actually, what's really at fault was, the system as a whole, because the system as a whole was fundamentally flawed. But up until Chernobyl, they were able to cover up the flaws in the Soviet system. So let me explain how this works, because it really is a kind of microcosm of the Soviet Union and of the bureaucracy and in the Soviet Union. So because it's a state-run economy, because it's socialism, and socialism is a state-run economy, everything is controlled by the state. Everything is owned by the state. And everyone works for the state. And the state, or rather the bureaucrats in the state apparatus, tell you what to do. They tell you exactly what to do. They tell you what you should work, what to produce, what to do with the produce, because usually you can't keep that, because everything is state-owned, state-controlled, and you are assigned everything. You are assigned duties, you are assigned your job, you are assigned where you live, you are even assigned your property, you are even assigned basically your food, yeah, basically, it's a bit more complex than that, but basically that's what it boils down to. So no matter what industry you're in, or no matter what position, you always have goals to meet, goals set by the state. But usually those goals are impossible to meet. So one example that's related to Chernobyl, and that's quite typical, is that when the power plant was constructed, the roof was supposed to be made of non-flammable materials. But the people constructing the roof didn't use non-flammable materials. They used flammable materials. Not because they were incompetent or stupid or evil, but because there was simply no other way to construct the roof, because the non-flammable materials that were required in the assignment given by the state didn't actually exist. And why didn't they exist? Well, they did exist, but they were just not available. Why were they not available? Well, precisely because of the state-run economy. Not everything, this is a bit difficult to understand, but because of, because of the state-run and planned nature of a socialist economy, a lot of things aren't available because they're not being produced in the quantity required, or they're not being shipped to the relevant locations. So you can't just, it's not a free market economy. You can't just go somewhere and buy the stuff you need. It doesn't work like that. Everything is allocated, so, and because everything, because everything is planned out, but planned out imperfectly, of course, because you can't plan out every detail. So things like the state telling you, because everything is decided by the state. So on the one hand, the state tells you, build the roof with fireproof materials. But on the other hand, the state does not provide you with the fireproof materials that you need. And there is no alternative. There is no free market. So what are you supposed to do? You can't just not build the roof. You're gonna be in trouble if you don't complete your assignment. But neither can you say like, because of the messed up socialist planned economy, I'm not able to get the materials that I need. You can't say that either. So what are you supposed to do? There is only one thing that you can do if you want to keep your job and if you want to get ahead in the Soviet system, and that is to just build the roof with whatever is available and then just lie about it and say, oh yeah, the roof is fireproof, even though it really isn't. And that people are kind of forced to act that way in every aspect, and it was like that in every aspect of the construction of the Chernobyl power plant, but it was like that in every aspect of life in the Soviet Union, basically. That's how it was. And that's how it was in East Germany as well. That's how it I know that kind of system. That's how it always is in socialism. because everything is planned and everything is decided by the state, some things just don't match. Some things just, you wouldn't be able to get anything done if you don't just, bend the rules a little from time to time and make do with whatever you have. But and then you are forced to cover it up, because if you're honest and tell them, well, I just wasn't able to complete the assignment because I just don't have the stuff that I need, then they're gonna be pretty pissed, and because then they're gonna be in trouble, because they're not able to meet the quota or whatever it is. So they're gonna let it out on you, and you're gonna be in trouble, and you're gonna lose your job, or worse, So everyone was afraid, and everyone had to complete the assignments by the state, even though oftentimes that wasn't possible, and there just was no other way than to make do with what you had and then to cover it up. That it just didn't work any other way, You wouldn't have been able to get anything done in any other way. So that kind of deception became normal. It didn't even feel like deception anymore, because there simply was no other way to get things done. So basically everyone was deceiving everyone else, and well, at least when it came to, well, not necessarily in their personal lives, but when it came to the workplace, and that shows really well, in everyone involved in the construction and operation of the Chernobyl power plant, because everyone messed up and everyone covered it up. That's just the way you did things back then, and then if something bad happens because of the fuck up, then you cover that up. You just keep covering stuff up. That's just kind of how it works, and it worked. Actually, it worked quite well, They were able to operate like that for many years, and and even people in the West, were kind of deceived by that. And back then, before Chernobyl, everyone was kind of thinking, yeah, the Soviet system works. It works. And they're able to have those great achievements, and everything is great, and nothing bad ever happens there. And of course, the reason nothing bad ever happens is because anything bad that happens always gets covered up. And that works, but it only works up until a certain point. Because eventually, the lies will just keep getting bigger and bigger, and the bad things, that happen because of all the fuck ups, that are not due to the individuals, but that are inherent in the system, it will just get so bad that eventually you will not be able to cover it up anymore. And they've always been able to lie about it and to cover everything bad up, and to make the Soviet Union seem like this great paradise that it was supposed to be, but that it never was. But it wasn't apparent back then. Before Chernobyl, it was not apparent to most people, because they always continued to just cover everything bad up, and it worked. But it only worked until Chernobyl, and then it didn't work anymore, because eventually the bad things and the disasters will get so big that eventually you can't cover it up anymore, and that point was reached with Chernobyl.